I'd like to call to order the annual meeting of the town of Chevy Chase. Would we first please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, well, thanks all of you who came tonight, both here, and I also see there's some people on the screen, so that's great. At least have some people calling in. The agenda for tonight is first, we're going to hear from one of our delegates to the House in Maryland, Jared Solomon. After that, I'll give a quick rundown of events of the year and what we look forward to next year. Then Irene is going to give a presentation of the Treasurer's Report. And after that, we will be holding a public hearing on the budget for fiscal year 24 and for the ordinance that creates the tax rate for that year. And then one final bit of agenda to say goodbye to one of our colleagues here, Joel, and that'll be it. So with that, I'd like to have Jared, if you could step up. And I want to say at the outset that someone who's been on the council now for 7 years, we have never had a harder working member of our delegation to the Maryland House than Jared Solomon. You have put in tremendous number of hours on our behalf, Jared, and the town owes you a lot, and we thank you very much for all your hard work and support. Really appreciate it.
Oh, well, thank you, Barney. I really appreciate it. And it's really been a joy to work with you and the rest of the council. And I know Todd's recovering from some medical issues. So I know he's on Zoom, but it's great to be able to work with Todd. And Joel, just want to recognize you. We've worked together on a number of issues. Thank you for your service to the community on so many different levels. You're going to be missed, but I know you're not going far. So it's great to be here with you all. I'll give kind of just a quick overview of some of the big issues that not only impacted the town, but were pretty substantial for us to pass overall. For those of you I haven't had a chance to meet.
Everybody hear Jared? Is the mic working? People on the works?
You can.
Okay, good.
Yes.
Perfect. Just checking.
Normally, nobody ever tells me to speak louder. So my name's Jared Solomon. I'm one of your delegates for District 18 to the State House of Delegates. Bring greetings on behalf of Delegate Emily Shetty, Aaron Kaufman, and Senator Waldstreicher. I serve on the Appropriations Committee in Annapolis. I also was really honored this year to be appointed as Deputy Speaker Pro Tem as part of Speaker Jones's leadership team. So it's been a really interesting session. We obviously have a new governor. We had a number of new legislators come in. And I will say from the outset, typically sort of year one of a term, especially with a new governor, often there aren't a lot of big things that happen. This was the exception and not the norm. We got a tremendous amount accomplished, as you'll hear, not only locally in issues that impact our community in Montgomery County at large, but issues that are just really important on the global stage and national issues that we're dealing with. So I'll just kind of start really quickly. There were sort of three big areas that I think are of interest to folks in the town globally. One, we passed a tremendous package of abortion rights and healthcare protection laws, including codifying the right to abortion in the state constitution, which you'll get to vote on in 2024, shielding patients, doctors, and other medical providers from having to disclose any records. We know we see terrible things going on in other states, and we want to make sure that no provider in Maryland is going to be subject to those kind of laws. We also made sure that our higher ed institutions provided family planning support to students as well. On gun safety, which is another huge topic and a huge issue that we tackled this year, we passed a bill called the Gun Safety Act, which substantially limits the places in which folks can carry a firearm, and that was very much in response to the Bruin decision. I will happily answer questions on that and spare you to go into the minutia. We also raised the legal age for somebody to carry a regulated firearm in the state from 18 to 21, and passed a bill called Jalen's Law, which is something that many of us have been fighting for years around safe gun storage. So it was a big year for gun safety regulation. We passed a state budget near and dear to my heart as a leader on the Appropriations Committee that invested an additional $900 million in fully funding the blueprint for Maryland's future. We put about another $100 million into behavioral health programs, nearly $400 million into affordable housing programs and building actual housing stock. And this was all within the context of a fiscal write-down with an economic situation that's a little uncertain, but we also put record amounts of money into our state rainy day fund. And the budget was about as fiscally prudent as you could get, actually spent less money than budgets under the Hogan administration. So, you know, getting to sort of the local rub, you know, we really did bring the bacon home back to Montgomery County. I know sometimes there's always concerns that we don't get our fair share. This year, we certainly did. We overall increased state aid from the state to Montgomery County by 8%. That includes a $75 million increase in education funding for programmatic items, and then another $84 million in public school capital projects, which obviously is a significant need for us across the county. And then locally for projects not only in District 18, but that are really critical to our part of the county, we really did, I think, knock the ball out of the park. So locally for the town, you know, as Barney mentioned, we've been working hand in glove to make sure that the project to bring the farm women's market into the 21st century to create the amazing new space for parks is fully funded. So this year, in addition to the $500,000 we got last year from the state, we brought home another $1 million for that. For the bus rapid transit projects that are so critical to sort of the county's future and our transportation needs, we brought home about $20 million in dedicated funding, specifically just this year alone. But one of the big things that we were able to do this year, so last year we got a fund that is available statewide to counties that have bus rapid transit programs. Right now, Montgomery County is the only county that has one. So there's $27 million annually set aside. Montgomery County gets all of that. But what we were able to do this year was pass legislation that allows us to bond that money. So it says no matter what, Montgomery County is going to be given $20 million a year towards bus rapid transit. So that takes what is $20 million and allows it to be turned into quite a bit more for, you know, the lifetime. It was piggybacked on bonding authority that goes with some of the improvements to the stadiums that the state owns, Camden Yards and M&T Bank Stadium up in Baltimore. So those bonds are at least going to be 20 to 30 years. So that means Montgomery County will have a steady stream of bondable revenue to be able to build out our transportation projects for the considerable future. So that's a big deal. We also, one of the biggest economic development projects that is just in the corner of our district, but right up Rockville Pike, is the new Institute for Health Computing. And that is a partnership that literally could make Montgomery County sort of the center hub of health computing for the next 50 years. And it's a partnership between the University of Maryland, College Park, and their AI program, University of Maryland, Baltimore County, and their cybersecurity, the University of Maryland Medical System, which is our medical school for the state university, and then the University of Maryland Medical System, and the 6 to 7 million, depopulated medical health records that they have. So they are setting up an institute that's it's about 40 to 50,000 square feet right now until the building is completed, and that is going to be on the Pike and Rose site, on the western side of Rockville Pike. But the eventual plan is to build a flagship institute run, again, with a collaboration through the university system on the site of the North Bethesda Metro. So we brought home money not only to begin the actual capital construction for the institute, but to create a second metro entrance, which will essentially unlock what is right now 16 acres of overgrown field. So if you're going north on Rockville Pike, it's just after you pass the current North Bethesda or White Flint Metro station, and it's just kind of this big empty space, not really usable. Creating that second metro entrance is going to unlock what could eventually turn into a science and technology campus that will actually exceed the amount of square footage and economic development that we were competing with, Virginia for Amazon. So. No, it is actually, so it is not the mall. It's a little ways up the road. So it's just as you hit, I guess it's sort of there's the REI and LL Bean in the Pike and Rose. It's almost on that opposite side. It's a little hard to see from Rockville Pike because it's you have the metro, and then it's sort of the uncovered part of the tracks and a very bizarrely shaped hill. And so that's going to be leveled. The second metro entrance, again, sort of unlocks the ability for additional development to go there. And, there's a number of technology companies that have already signed on to be able to do research and to do work with this computing institute. And essentially what it does is it takes the drug development process out of wet labs and out of the clinical trial phase, and a lot of it can be done through supercomputers. It is the Institute for Health Computing, yeah. And may also give us a pretty sizable advantage in getting the DARPA-H, which is the big federal government sort of advanced research project on health. So between the Institute for Health Computing, NIH, and the FDA, and Walter Reed, all within hopefully short metro or bus rapid transit ride, you'd be able to connect all of that. And then you have eventually the Purple Line completed, where you can hop on and get to the heart of the computing center at College Park. So it's kind of flown a little under the radar, but it's a big deal. And we don't have a flagship campus, obviously, for the university system in Montgomery County. We have the universities at Shady Grove, which is going to provide undergraduate and graduate interns, and they're going to run the intern programs there. But to bring this institute here is potentially a crown jewel, and again, could lead to more economic development with significantly fewer tax breaks than the Amazon development that we had been competing for. So it was a big deal. We brought money back for the second entrance. We brought money back for the capital expenditures around the center, and we're working hand in glove with the county and the university system to make that happen. So it was a lot of big legislative victories and policy wins that we were excited to partner with our new governor on, a lot of important funding priorities locally, a lot of money back for parks, for our public schools, and then a lot of really parochial issues that are potentially going to transform, and help us grow our part of the county. So happy to, I think maybe one or two questions. I don't want to waylay the meeting.
Actually, Jerry, can you lay out the timeline for that project?
Yeah, so the Institute is just about getting up and running. They are going to be leasing space in in one of the office buildings currently in Pike and Rose. And then I believe it's probably going to be 3 or 4 years before the actual building is complete. The hope is the metro entrance can be sort of integrated into the actual construction of the building, which lowers some of the costs. And that second entrance makes that parcel much more usable for further development. Yeah.
Legislation that I saw go in there that had to do with creating some ethical or tightening the ethics standards that are on the standards for the planning board.
Yes, yeah. So that was a local bill process. So what that turned into is going to be a sort of a countywide review committee that includes members of the General Assembly and our local delegation, members of the county, members of the public. I think the concern was that, there were very strong feelings on both sides of that bill. And some of the policy that was put in there, I think the thought was, this is a 100-year agency. It definitely needs a review from top to bottom, and a very prescriptive bill may not be the right way to go with that without having giving the public an opportunity to weigh in on it. And so the county executive has pledged to work with the delegation, to work with members of the community. And I believe you should see more information on the makeup of that, or the actual composition of the commission shortly. And I can give you a card, and I'm happy to connect with you afterwards and get you that information. Yeah, Deb.
Yeah, okay. I think I've been following this pretty well, and I know that the abortion issue and sensible gun laws, I think sensible, and marijuana.
Correct.
And I guess the compassionate dying did not pass. Is there something else that you see, that I'm missing?
Well, so yes, so I didn't mention, we did, obviously the voters of the state chose to legalize marijuana on last year's ballot. So we passed sort of the regulatory framework to create a legal marketplace for marijuana starting on July 1st. That was probably one of the other biggest pieces of legislation that moved through. Death with dignity did not pass this year. My sense is that the Senate is going to, so the House passed it overwhelmingly. The governor had said, this governor says he will sign it. Governor Hogan never committed to that. So it wasn't clear that there were votes to override a potential veto. I believe that the Senate is going to, the focus is going to be on the Senate next year. That was another disappointment. I will say probably the other big disappointment of the session was a bill to allow undocumented Marylanders to purchase health insurance on the exchange. Originally, the bill had it that they would be provided subsidies like anyone else. That was eventually stripped out. And even a bill that literally just would have added potentially 75,000 fairly young and healthy Marylanders who, just given the opportunity to purchase, they would have purchased, did not make it out of the Senate. That was probably the biggest disappointment that impacted real people this year. And then we accomplished quite a bit. I didn't talk about the environment, but we accomplished quite a bit on, we created a system to get us to another 8 megawatts of wind energy. We prioritized clean, medium and heavy duty trucks, as well as clean energy or clean building standards, as well as some other energy conservation. And I know to many folks in Montgomery County, of course, now I'm going to blank on what we call it, the community solar projects that we had passed as a pilot program 2 or 3 years ago. We extended that and made it permanent. Yeah, and maybe the last question, so I can turn it back over. Yeah, so I was just having this conversation with somebody the other morning. Yes, the question was, what about ranked choice voting and the possibility of doing it in Montgomery County? So as most of you probably know, the county obviously governs their own elections, but the state has ultimate legal authority over granting certain exceptions to individual counties and individual jurisdictions. And so in order to give Montgomery County the authority to potentially create a ranked choice voting system or an alternative system to what we have now, the state has to authorize that. So we have had a local bill. We've had a local bill that has passed out of our local delegation. So the way it works in Annapolis is for a bill that applies only to one county or 2 counties, we often have Montgomery and Prince George's County bills. They have to go out and be approved by your local delegation first. And then once they pass out of the local delegation, it still has to go through the full process of the General Assembly. Typically, local bills are given sort of local courtesy, alcohol laws or local bills or things that the planning board was a local bill. But for something like ranked choice voting, it tends to draw a lot more attention because to some of our colleagues in other parts of the state, it is not just Montgomery County having the authority, it is the beginning of potentially changing the election systems that we have statewide, which I don't know would necessarily be a bad thing in some instances. So this bill has passed out of our delegation again this year. It has not made it out of the Ways and Means Committee. My sense is that we have some colleagues, and I've had these conversations with people who are concerned that ranked choice voting will disenfranchise voters of color, that it will be incredibly expensive because it will require quite a bit of education. That's not how I see things, and many of my colleagues in our county see things. And I think that the hope would be that, again, this doesn't require it. It gives the county the discretion to create an alternative system. So we still have some work to do on that. Montgomery County is there. We need support from other folks in other parts of the state. And I would say if it's an issue that you feel passionately about, really talking to the folks on the Ways and Means Committee is really kind of where the rubber meets the road, unfortunately. But yeah, many of us are going to keep up the fight on that.
Sure, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. And I'll stick around if anybody has any other questions.
Again, thank you. There's no doubt that all of you accomplished a great deal. Well done. Thank you. As mayor, I'd like to review what we've done this last year and what we've worked on here in our little town. Not as dramatic, perhaps, as what's done statewide, but still matters a great deal to us. First, it was a virtually normal year post-COVID, and that's great. We had in-person events like tonight, but hybrid. I think we've gained over time experience on how to run hybrid meetings so people can participate both ways. Lots of town events, but I think that in itself is a great accomplishment, a feeling of our community having held together through COVID and being able to enjoy each other's presence personally after COVID. Not entirely after COVID, but largely after COVID. So we feel much better. In terms of the work of the council and of the town, the first thing I'll mention is the Bethesda Market, what's now called the Bethesda Market Park, by the way. I think it's important the word Bethesda be in it. And the Parks Department considers the development of the parking lots on 24 and 10 as a single park two portions of one park, just so you know the nomenclature. But frankly, for those of us who've always cared and have made a condition for the town's participation, that park be developed across both parking lots, that's actually nomenclature that I think makes a lot of sense. There's one park on both those parking lots. The funding package is in place for $27.7 million, plus another $500,000 that came from the state, thanks to Jared and his colleagues, that was obtained last October. And that was absolutely fundamental for us to sort of turn the corner from aspirational to execution. And there's a lot of work to be done, but we're much better on this side of the line than we were on the earlier side of the line. The charrette process, I think, is going well. And I think many of you may have seen or participated in the meeting, one of the two meetings that were held. And I think generally, and we saw this in the reaction that we received in the comments that came into the town, was generally very positive reactions to the concept plan, feeling that's creative, imaginative, scope for a lot of different activities. And when we looked at all the pros and cons, sure, there are some people who did not want a dog park, but there were many more people who did. There are some people who did not want a gaming area, but many more people who did. And just generally, I think they had captured well what this community also has as its own priorities. The next stage is going to be for the Parks Department to come back with a virtual presentation of the next phase or development of next phase of their development, which will be in June. And then I'll later on talk a bit about the work next year that has to be done. But this was a really major benchmark for us this past year. The town, as you know, has committed $4.5 million. We're also channeling $1.5 million from the state, so a total of $6 million coming through the town. And it is truly a transformative project for Bethesda, for the surrounding communities, and for ourselves. And as I like to think about it, the developers have been successful in pushing Bethesda up. We have been successful in making it green. This is going to be the largest green roof in Montgomery County, perhaps the state, and is going to obviously open up an area that our children, our grandchildren, great-grandchildren will be enjoying forever in Bethesda, and I think will really make a difference for everybody. The other major project that took a lot of our time this past year was the Corso development. And I think we undertook a process of great deal of collaboration work with our residents, but also a very cordial and frank set of negotiations with the developers. And I think arrived at a place that we felt certainly very comfortable supporting. The binding elements, that's the official term, that are connected to the zoning application, which has now been approved by the hearing examiner, will be shortly before the county council, contains all the key matters in which we know residents cared most about. No cut through traffic through the area, 3 acres preserved as forest in perpetuity, reduced heights on the outside of the building. That was the one that was toughest, and they finally gave up on the very last round of negotiations. Commitment for adequate parking, also a traffic study so we can hopefully get signalization on Connecticut that would be appropriate to the development, although that will depend largely on the State Highway Administration. That's not something that's in the hands of the developers. And continued provision of garage space for the town at no cost in perpetuity. So these were all the things that we cared a great deal about. There's a lot that we need to follow up on, making sure the lighting is non-invasive, making sure that all the obligations are complied with. And I should also mention there are pathways that will connect the town to the project to the town, which we believe is very important to help foster a sense of community and that these are residents of the town of Chevy Chase. There'll be events at Corso, which residents will want to enjoy. There'll be an ice cream parlor, which I imagine a lot of residents want to enjoy. I think we hope that that will end up being part of our community and not just an isolated haven for elderly people. On Zimmerman Park, that progress has continued, albeit slowly. We have found that there is just an endless possible series of delays that can arise, even in the simplest of infrastructure projects, because of having to deal with the underground utilities, the rights of way that ensue from the WSSC, from everybody. And we're now caught up in one more potential delay. But the designs are final. We do expect to execute them, but it's still going to take us a bit more time. Another issue that we took up very seriously this year and finally had a breakthrough was getting an improvement in the signalization across East-West Highway at Maple Avenue. As everybody knows, because of the pathway that now goes on Sleaford underneath the Purple Line, this becomes a very accessible and very safe way for students to get to school without having to go up the narrow sidewalk on the south side of East-West Highway, provided that they can safely cross East-West Highway to begin with. And initially, the State Highway Administration put in only a yellow flashing beacon, which we did not believe was adequate. We spent months and months and months trying to get that upgraded to something more prominent, basically red in it. We had the strong support of Michael Paler, the head of the traffic safety for Montgomery County, a really good guy, and county government. Just nothing was happening. Finally, we engaged the state delegation with Jared and his colleagues. Boom, 3 weeks later, we had a meeting with the State Highway Administration, and they made a commitment that they will upgrade the signalization to ensure that there is at least a flashing red light at that intersection, which we hope and trust will make it safe enough for kids to be willing to cross. But that's a very important development for us. We're continuing to monitor the restart of the Purple Line construction. Usual number of issues that occasionally arise with people's backyard fences and things. But we're also certainly become aware of what many residents along that line are very concerned with, which is the drying up of Copeland Run. We're now seeking to ask, again, the state delegation to help us arrange a meeting so that we can talk through how we work with this. It's clear it's a diffused problem. It's not, or diffused number of answers as to how that problem was created. But what we really want is what can be done to mitigate it, to potentially bring some water back. And that's the discussion we want to have. We don't know if we can be successful in that, but we want to make every effort to try. We've also agreed to strengthen the sidewall of Copeland Run near Lynn Drive. We're going to take some money from our own reserve, from ARPA money really, for that, a few $100,000, but that will secure the embankment, make sure that it doesn't erode further. And that is far enough downstream that that actually will receive a great deal of water, even though upstream we have the dryness that I mentioned. Then we've also had the rebirth of in-person events. The Community Relations Committee has done a spectacular job in what they've arranged this year. The July 4th picnic was a great success, back to its normal, robust attendance. A Spring Fest, a chili dinner, tiki party, several discussion and desserts. The CPR Red Cross training was very successful and really appreciated by participants. Trips to the Roundhouse Theater, that was a great innovation. I hope we continue doing that. Play dates in the park and movie nights, and Thanksgiving dinner baskets and winter clothing drive, which were very successful. So thanks to the committee, and thanks, Irene, to your being the liaison. You've really done tremendous work. Also, we've taken up the issue of anti-Semitism and hate, and the town has passed a resolution that we in turn have sent around to all the other municipalities in Montgomery County. The county passed a strong and good resolution, and actually in their resolution asked for help and work with the municipalities, and we sort of took up that challenge. Joel has been very helpful working on this and leadership in our council. And we now just, in fact, as of last night, received approval from Rockville. So we have Rockville, Gaithersburg, and other 10 or so communities. And we hope to also get Tacoma Park, but we'd like to really get almost unanimous consent from the municipalities for this. And it's a resolution both condemning it, but also an action plan that we want seminars and briefings and things that happen in our communities to help raise awareness to the issue and what people need to know and understand about it. We've also spent time earlier in this year on updating the 5G ordinance. That is a major change and help to make sure that we are prepared for those towers when they come down the pike, so to speak. I will want to thank there was a special group. Michael, I'm glad you're here tonight because I'm going to call you out. With you and Beth and Barnett and Ken Rubin, thank you for your effort on that ordinance because it really helped the council to have the input of the committee as we framed that and passed it. And then, of course, we maintain our town services, and we're nearly completing a really multi-year program of upgrading virtually every street and sidewalk in town, arising from the underground work that's been done by WSSC and PEPCO, which, because of their work, and they, of course, reimbursed the town for a substantial amount of the cost of the repaving. So it made sense for the town to do it holistically and do the sidewalks at the same time. We've now done a huge amount across the whole town. There's only one section left really up Meadow toward Connecticut. But within another year, we'll basically repave practically every street in the town. And then also we've had a continued focus on safety. additional speed bumps, radar speed boards, introduction of stop signs with activated LED lights. And also, we last year put in money to add some police patrolling in the afternoons when kids get out of school. And in the budget for this coming year, as Irene will talk about, we've extended it to cover every day of the school year. So with all that good work, there are also a lot of people to thank. First, I'd like to thank my colleagues, Joel, Joy, Irene, and Rich, for their thoughtfulness, the long hours, the dedication, and the collegiality. We've really worked well together this year, and that means a lot to all of us who are volunteers and take the time to do this. I want to thank our state delegation, Senator Jeff Wallstreicher, but delegates Jared, Emily Shetty, and Al Carr, and now Aaron Kaufman for their good work, obtaining the initially $1.5 and now total of $2 million for the support the Parks project. I'm sorry, 2.5, I misspoke. 2.5 to the Parks Department plus another 1.5 to us. So total of $4 million from the state to support the project, which is great. Also, a lot of county officials that have helped out town in the last year. Andrew Friedson, our district county council member, past county president Gabe Albornoz, who was very supportive in marshaling the county council to support the appropriation of the county for the park project. The current president, Evan Glass, who spoke here 2 months ago. County Executive Mark Elridge, who is also very important to that. And also Andrew Friedson also has been involved in a number of other issues outside the parks in town and been very responsive to us. Besides inside the town, while obviously ultimately the decisions are taken by the council, we all look very heavily to the committees for the work that they do and the support they can give us. I want to thank particularly all the committees. I'm going to go through them, but Community Relations Committee, again, for their outstanding work, and Tambra Leonard and Quinn Tran for their co-leadership of the committee. Terrific job. I want to thank the 4-H committee, as we call it, even though it's now the Corso project, led by Ken Brew and Chris Brew and Ken Rubin. They did incredible work over the space of 2.5 years. And we're always there to give the council ideas, to review a myriad of documents and various drafts that had to be looked at. And we can count on them to look through things quickly, come back with comments, and be very on point and very helpful. The Public Services Committee, headed by Howard Burkhoff. I mentioned the work on 5G, which was so helpful to us, but they've also done a lot of work on town safety and taking their job very conscientiously. The Long Range Planning Committee, headed by Ellen Cornelius Erickson, who's thought about the parks. A Land Use Committee headed by Deedon Ingram. Thank you, Deedon, for your consistent work. I have to say, Deedon is one of the unsung heroes of this town. She has been so engaged in volunteer work for so long in the committees, and we all look to her very much for her advice and thought. The Climate Environment Committee is headed by Dan Klahosi, who's now moved out of town, but a very good guy and did a lot of good work on the committee. And also we have 2 boards and a commission. The Elections Board, which is headed by Kirk Renault, and they certainly have done some important work this year. And the Ethics Commission, headed by Evelyn Chung, and the Water Board, headed by Michael Goulin. And we care about the comments from residents. Sometimes they're not always comments we want to hear. Other times we're delighted to hear them, but we know how important they are to receive them. And it's our job to respond and to take them seriously. And I hope and be thoughtful in working them through. I'd also like to thank Ann Wild and Wicca Davidson for running the listserv. That's an incredibly important tool of communication in our town. As a council member, I know that we sort of put out our official town criers, but I'm so grateful that you're willing to reprint them in the listserv, because I often feel that's when people finally really see them. So in any event, it's really important and helpful. And we know how many hours it takes for Ann and you to monitor that and get the information out. And then finally, I want to thank the town staff. They've done a terrific job. Dave Walton, Miguel Hernandez, John Lloyd, who I don't know if maybe you know John. He just joined us full-time this year, though he's been a consultant to the town for a very long time. And our new services aide, Lily Murray. Lily? Hi. And of course, Todd Hoffman, who's done such an outstanding work for us as town manager for so long. And I'm very pleased to say that we've now completed the negotiations and executed another contract with Todd. for his to serve with us for up to another 5 years. I have no doubt we'll want him for 5 years. Whether he wants us for 5 years, that's a different matter. But in any event, Todd, thank you very much for staying with us for another period of time. They accomplish so much on behalf of the town, and there are so few of them, and they do so much work. So thank you. I want a big round of applause for the town staff. So looking forward to next year, and I realize I'm missing a sheet of paper, and rather than speaking extemporaneously, I don't know, what are we going to do next year? I think the coming down the pike on Corso, we do have to monitor, and we'll be try to stay on top of the issues of the traffic study that's going to be done and what signalization project will be coming out of that. And also the parking study and making sure that there's enough parking on site. And they will be going for their site plan, not probably by the fall. And we'll be monitoring that work very carefully to make sure that they stay in compliance with all the binding elements that they've adhered to. The other feature that's going to come through this fall, which is extremely important, is that with Corso, we not only have these binding elements which are inside of the application for rezoning, and that's an agreement between the county and the developers. Separate from that, and we sent out a town crier a few days ago about this, there is a declaration of covenants where we've extracted from that long list of binding elements the core ones that matter most to us, put that in a separate document, and they have committed to executing that as an agreement between the town and themselves. What this means is that going forward, if and when they wish to make any material changes to the project or any successor wishes to make such a change, they not only have to get permission from the county to do that through the planning board, they have to come back to us. So it puts us in a very strong position to basically look out to protect the interests that we think we have gained so far in that project. On the Bethesda Market Parks, we'll be looking at the completion of the charrette process. Then it'll be up to the developers to file their site plan, which we hope they will with the planning board, which we hope they will by the fall. And then that will take months, probably not be approved to early next year. And then they would begin pulling permits with construction that would probably start a year after that. So we're looking at construction starting in 2025, 26, I guess. And it will take them 2 years to build. The issue as we go through this, and we've been candid in talking about this with residents, but I'll mention again tonight, is we will have to grapple with cost overruns. That's already hit us in terms of undergrounding the utilities, both because of this inflation, but also Pepco, who will be actually doing that work, have come back with standards of what they want to see done, which are more than what the developers had initially anticipated. So we have to grapple with that, but also just general inflation. So I think just candidly, at some point when we really get a full handle on this and we know exactly what the final plans will be and the developers have fully costed them out, there may well be what I've referred to in the past as another round of stone soup, where all the partners are going to be asked to see what they can contribute. And I expect that will come back to the town as well. I hope we can find a way to support that. We're very, we've already done so much. We know how important these projects are, and we've been such a leader in it. But that's an issue that we may be reckoning with this coming year. The ongoing Purple Line construction, which just we have to monitor and work with. Zimmerman Park construction, we hope, will take place. We will be organizing programs to combat hate speech and anti-Semitism. And finally, we are going to have to handle, I think, an issue which we expect to come down the pike this coming year, which will be the likelihood of county action to permit multifamily housing in single-family residential neighborhoods. This issue first came out now the year before this past year. And Irene and Ellen Cornelius Erickson led some very good town forums, but it sort of died away. But now with the approval of Thrive Montgomery by the county council last year, and now with a new planning board that will be fully seated by this summer, we expect the issue will come up again. And I think this is going to be one of the important issues for the council to consider. And our job to begin with is going to be to listen very carefully to town residents, and then to have a really very thoughtful engagement on the very sensitive and critical issue as we find our own position, and then work with other communities on it. So it'll be a very interesting year. Well, thank you all very much. And with that, I will turn it over to Irene, our treasurer, to present the budget.
Thank you, Mayor. So I believe that Todd's going to bring up a presentation. So everyone in the audience will be able to see it on this side, and hopefully everyone online will be able to see. So basically, it's a set of slides that are going to summarize what this fiscal year, which will end on June 30th, is shaping up to look like. And then going forward, what we expect in terms of revenue projections, proposed property tax rate, and then proposed budget from an operating and capital expenditure standpoint. Next slide. So next slide, Todd, whenever you have a chance. Thank you. So this is a general summary of our fiscal year, that expected to be a fiscal year for 23. As you can see, there's a rather significant surplus of $2.25 million. And there's four main components of that surplus. First, we received more than $571,000 in additional income tax revenue that was not known, if you will, at the time that we did last year's budget. So that's part of it. Another is the ARPA grant, which had an additional $700,000, more than $336,000 in interest income. And then we spent less this year in terms of consultants and snow removal. There were no storms. And there's a delay, obviously, in the Zimmerman Park projects and some road repairs. So when everything is said and done, that's how the $2.25 million came about. We, taking into account the Bethesda Market Park reserve of $4.5 million out of our reserve amount, we're left with $10.35 million. And I'll discuss ARPA in the next slide. So as you know, we received $2.4 million in the American Rescue Plan Act as a grant. And the Treasury rules allow for local governments to use these grant funds for the provision of government services. So earlier this year, the Town Council approved a plan to spend a portion of these ARPA funds on government services through fiscal year 2026. And ultimately, while we're pulling these funds into our operating revenue stream to offset these government services, the town is going to set aside an equal amount to augment our town reserves, and so that we can support special social, environmental, and infrastructure programs. So what the intent of ARPA is will be there, but it allows us more time to be more thoughtful and frankly impactful for the type of projects that we want to do without having a specific deadline imposed. Next. So this pie chart shows where our revenue generally comes from. And I'd like to just spend a moment here because of all these parts of the pie, the only part that the town actually has the ability to have some say in is the real property tax, the $131,000. The rest of it is all formulaic. So the income tax component of our revenue is defined by the states for all municipalities. They receive, it's the same formula that's equated through all municipalities. ARPA grant, obviously, that's another federal formula. Interest income, we have no say in interest rates. Highway user revenue is also provided to us, if you will, by the state projections. And other revenue essentially is made up of utility tax, which is paid for by the utilities, state aid that we receive from for police protection, parking meters, permit fees, things like that. So the two remaining pieces of this pie are the real property tax and the county tax duplication reimbursement. This is another formula, the latter, the county tax reimbursement is another formula that was defined in the last year. And it's based on a municipality having assessed a property tax, a real property tax. So if we were not to, we would not be receiving any sort of reimbursement from the county. And Therefore, you can see that we effectively, with the proposed rate, are anticipating $131,000 in real property tax, but our duplication reimbursement is $265. So we do receive more than we pay in, and it allows us for, if we were not to assess, we would not be able to receive that reimbursement. Next slide. So this is a slide that effectively looks at what the property tax rates are in relation to other municipalities in the area. And as you can see, we're on the lower side of the spectrum. We're in fact, and I'll talk about this a little bit in the next slide, we're going to lower, where I am proposing that we're lowering the property tax rate. But again, as you can see, for the level of services that are provided, we do a great job in not having to also assess this as some communities do, a higher rate. Next slide. So what we have done over the last 15 years or so is keep a general constant yield in terms of the rate that we assess. And what we're proposing is 0.9 cents per $100 of assessed value. And the reason that we're lowering it is many of you may have received over these last few months kind of what your new property value assessment is, and it went higher for many of us. And what we're doing to keep that kind of constant amount of funding is to lower the rate. It equates to about $100 per household, give or take. And so it's a pretty consistent amount across the board. Next slide. So what we're proposing for the next fiscal year, again, another beautiful pie chart. What I want to, and Mayor talked about this as well, there is increased funding allocated for police protection and increased funding for community events over the last year, but everything else is pretty standard in terms of what we've done in the past. But that's where the money is allocated for the operating budget. The next slide covers the capital budget. And that, again, relates to, obviously, stormwater management is a big issue. And then the streets and roads and park improvements as well. So hopefully in line with where our residents have also agreed are important investments to make. Next slide. So the summary effectively also anticipates a operating surplus of 1.85 million. And when you're then accounting for the capital expenditures, where surplus would be 934 million. Keep in mind, though, that, and I think this is kind of important to
934,000, Irene.
Sorry. Oh my God. Yeah. Millions and millions of dollars here. Sorry. When we take into account the ARPA grant, the 934,000, if you're taking away 700,000 from that, which is the ARPA grant going towards operating revenue, we're down to about $234,000. But then think about, again, that tax duplication, which I referred to earlier, which was 265,000. If those two elements were not there, we'd be looking at a slightly small deficit there. So I just want to make sure folks understand. The again, the balance, after we take into account the Bethesda Market Park Reserve for our reserves, it looks at $11.3 million approximately. So over time, we have been judicious in increasing our reserves because you never know what is going to happen. We want to make sure we are responding to residents that want to make investments. So if you have any ideas, certainly would love to hear from you. We're not looking for pet projects as much as it's an opportunity, given the reserves, to make necessary investments that in the next generation will truly appreciate. But as you can see in these last few years, what we tried to delineate was not only the reserve as in blue, the net reserve, but also taking into account what's been set aside for the parks, for the Bethesda Market Park, and then the ARPA balance. So it gives you a clearer idea of just what constitutes our reserve amount. So with that, I'll take any questions. Crystal clear? Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Irene. Appreciate it. All of us, with the exception of Rich, have had the pleasure of being treasurer, so we know it's real work. With that, we'd like to open the public hearing to discuss either the budget that has just been presented and or the ordinance that sets the tax rate for this coming year, the one that Irene referred to at 9 tenths of a cent, 9 mils per $100 to raise approximately $100 per household. I think that's correctly put. So is there anyone who wishes to speak to either of those points? And if you wish to raise your hand and you're on the screen, that's fine too. We can see, I guess, virtual hands or real hands, or Todd is monitoring that. So Karen Elkins, I see a thumb that went up. I don't know if that means you wish to speak or just an agreement.
Agreed.
Agreed. Okay. Okay. Any other, no comments? All right. Well, that's a successful public hearing, Jared, isn't it? Very good. Okay. With that, then I would like to move to the ordinance or the resolution that we have for tonight. Motion to both approve the budget for FY24 as has been set out by our treasurer, and also the ordinance that sets the tax rate at 9 mils per $100. Is there a motion for that?
No, I second the resolution for the tax rate and the budget.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. It's a motion for approval of the budget for FY24 and for setting the tax rate at 9 mils per $100 to rate for the tiny local component of the property tax, the one that ends up being around $100 per household per year. Who made to make a resolution?
I'm happy to second the resolution for the FY24 budget and the 9 mils
Okay.
tax rate for the town.
Was there, anyone initially introduced the resolution? Before
I
we
guess
got to
I'll
the second?
introduce that. I'm sorry.
Okay,
I thought
Joel
you introduced it.
Is there a second?
That's what I get.
Second.
Being
Okay.
UP.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, it passes unanimously. Great. All right, with that, I have, get ready, Joel. Um, So the last bit of business, which you often have to do in a given year, is to say goodbye to one of our council members. And this year is saying goodbye to Joel Rubin. Joel, you've been a member of this council for 6 years. It's a long time. On that, you've done a great deal of good work on behalf of our town and its residents. And my colleagues and I would like to acknowledge your service and thank you for it. It's been an eventful 6 years. During this time, our council has grappled with and managed many important issues: support for the creation of the Bethesda Market Park, redevelopment of the 4-H property into retirement community, planned improvements at Zimmerman Park, and managing our town services through the pandemic. You have been deeply involved in all these issues as we've gone through them. You've also been passionate in seeking ways to broaden resident engagement, supporting the rights of non-citizens and 16 and 17-year-olds to vote in town elections, and pushing us to embrace clear and simple procedures for mail-in balloting. Nothing means more to you than enhancing our democracy, and that's something you bring to the table every town meeting. Most recently, you have wanted the town to step up and directly engage in the necessary fight against hate speech and anti-Semitism. That effort, we assure you, will continue after your departure from this council. But as all of us in the council know, it is not just the big items that get our attention. We must also be involved in the daily stuff of government, including the vital work of reviewing variances to our ordinances. In this, Joel, I have valued your judgment and common sense. What amazes me is that you were able to offer your services to the town notwithstanding a demanding public career. We all have our reasons for being harried and busy, but not many of us can say, I'll be there and we'll call you from the car on the way. I'll be racing back from an interview on CNN. But that's you. But good heavens, you not only have a demanding career, you have 3 teenage daughters. So indeed, you help the town despite having 2 full-time jobs. So Joel, thank you for your service and for the commitment you were able to make to help the town of Chevy Chase and its residents. And as a token of our appreciation, your colleagues, Joy, Rich, Irene, and I will deliver to you in early fall flower bulbs for your gardens. May they add beauty to your home year after year and serve as a reminder of the enduring good work we have accomplished together during the 6 years of service on the town council. A warm regards to you, Joel, and best wishes for your future endeavors.
Yeah, all I want to say, I'll just respond real briefly that the beauty of this experience is that it's a collective effort. And I look around the room and I see every face I basically worked with at some level or another over the last half dozen years, including clearly, the folks here on the dais and many other folks before. So thank you and thank you. I mean, this is volunteer work. We love it. We live here. And, thank you all for embracing me in this 6-year period of service and for making this a really wonderful place to live. My daughters, since you brought it up, my youngest, we're coming back from a weekend away. She's getting ready for her bat mitzvah, and she was just explaining to me how we live in the best place in the world. And she's right. So
But in a few years, she can run,
she can vote sooner than run.
That's true.
But hopefully one day. But no, it's really beautiful. And thanks to everybody for all of your perseverance as well through the pandemic and staying engaged and working virtually. And none of us has seen anything like it. And to see Todd and the team make this continue and work and keep our services going, I think is a remarkable achievement in and of itself. A lot of governments around the country have struggled deeply, and ours, it was seamless. I really believe that. And I think it's because, of the whole team, the whole staff, and the community here. So great stuff. Really appreciate it. And good luck in the future.
Thank you, Joe. Thanks. Any other agenda items for my colleagues? Okay. With that, we will adjourn our annual meeting. See you next year.